Is it my, I was waiting for.
Go ahead,
Mr. Mayor.
Becky Gray.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Hello, my name is Becky Gray. I'm here to speak with you tonight about homelessness in the city of Pittsburgh and surrounding areas, what's being done about it, and what our future strategies could possibly be. I'm joined with a lot of colleagues here that are also working on this issue in our community, starting with Jamie Whitney from CCAP. I have Casey Brown here with Catholic Charities. Leah Gagnon, who is a community health center employee who is based at Wesley House. Megan Keener and Kim Froman, both at the Office of Community Development and Housing at the City of Pittsburgh. And then I also want to acknowledge Abby and Kelly here from Wesley House as well. So my name is Becky Gray. I'm the director of Building Health, Inc. We are a nonprofit owned and operated by Community Health Center of Southeast Kansas, and our goal is to address social determinants of health. So that includes housing, education, transportation, anything in the built environment. I put up here the agenda, but what I really want to do as we go through this is have a conversation. So feel free to jump in and ask any questions. If I'm saying something that is new to your ears, let me know. I'll try to avoid jargon, but after sitting in this arena for 20 years or so, sometimes it slips out. So please do stop me if I say something that you have a question about. If I can't answer it, or if it's about one of the programs at our partnering agencies, I'll defer to my colleagues. So first, I would really like to talk a little bit about the problem of homelessness and what we can do as community leaders in how we address it. So I'm asking that not only you as our elected officials, but also everybody that's joined us here today, really demonstrate leadership as we're discussing this problem as a community, because it's a community problem that's bigger than any one of us agencies can solve or any one person can solve. And so when I talk about demonstrating leadership, I encourage you to focus on facts and ask what the source is of those facts. There's a lot of feelings about homelessness and what we're seeing and what we're experiencing. Nobody's comfortable with it. No, it doesn't feel good to anybody. And I just want to make sure that as we elevate this conversation as a community, we're doing it in a very thoughtful manner. Other things to consider are activities to address homelessness. Has it been demonstrated as successful? Is it based in research? And how can we move forward from there? So I really want to kind of set the scene for this conversation by asking for demonstrated leadership from everybody involved in the conversation so that we can move forward to some good community solutions. So this slide is a lot of data. So the United States data came from the National Council to End Homelessness, and the local statistics came from the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition report on the 2022 point-in-time count. So all of these are probably associated to point-in-time counts. That is a single night in January where across the nation we literally attempt to count how many people are experiencing homelessness, literally unsheltered or sheltered. There's a lot of concern about how much we're seeing on the streets in Pittsburgh, right? We're seeing a lot of people who are homeless. They're visible to us, and it makes me uncomfortable to know that's happening in my community. But I think it's very important to recognize that we're not an anomaly. Pittsburgh is not unique in that. In the United States overall, there's been a 6% increase in homelessness since 2017. The pandemic really did exacerbate homelessness. There's more more people living out of shelters than in shelters ever before. 2022 was a record high number of individuals experiencing homelessness, with well over 500,000 in the United States. And the good news for us is the majority are on the coasts, right? The heartland is not necessarily the places where you're seeing people come to experiencing homelessness. We're homegrown in our homeless populations. So local statistics coming into the state of Kansas in 2022, there was about 2,400 people literally counted as homeless on that one night in January. In Southeast Kansas, that same night in January 2022, 322 people were identified as literally homeless. And in the city of Pittsburgh, it was down to 112. Now you'll notice there's a bullet point under Pittsburgh USD 250. That's our school district. They have a different definition of homelessness. This is embedded in the district. And so it's a little bit broader. It includes kids who have left home before they were ready to graduate due to conflicts with their parents or some other type of conflict at home. It also includes kids who are what we call doubled up. So if Casey and his family found themselves homeless, I would move them into my house until they could figure it out. That's doubling up. So they're in a home, but they might be relegated to sleeping on a couch and not their own bedroom. They might not have that safe place to do their schoolwork and things like that after school. So it's important that our district is aware of that. And that's why the number is a little bit disturbing to see there's 223 students in our school district that don't have their own home where their family feels safe. So that's our local statistics. I think we can also talk a little bit about how did we get here by looking at housing production in the city of Pittsburgh in the past. And it's kind of ironic to stand up here and say this because a lot of this was under my tenure. But there has been no goals for low-income housing since 2014, adopted by the city of Pittsburgh, or even longer, right? We were trying to diversify the spectrum of housing that we had. So we were doing other things like the Rural Housing Incentive District, but no specific focus on making housing for people with very low incomes.
Could I ask you,
Yes.
is that when the Best Hotel was set up for that situation?
The Best Hotel, let's see, was renovated with low-income tax credits. It would have been in 2010 or 11, perhaps, I think. That sound about right?
So
And
that was for low income.
it was for low-income tax credits, yep.
What defines low income versus homelessness income?
Low income versus homeless income?
Well, versus homeless.
Oh.
Low income versus homeless.
So the definition of homeless is somebody living in a place that's not meant for human habitation.
Okay.
So you can be high income and be homeless, right? Or you can be low income and be housed.
Right.
And then low income is typically defined as anything below 80% of our area median income. That's the official definition. One other piece about housing production, I don't believe there's ever been a goal for permanent supportive housing, at least in my awareness, in this region. And permanent supportive housing acknowledges that there are some people who need additional support to maintain their housing independently, whether that means someone's helping them manage their finances or their health care or their daily tasks of taking care of themselves. There are people who need that, right? We all were that when we were kids. Just once I turned 18, it wasn't so permanent anymore, right? It was time to get out. So I think those are important factors to consider as we are looking at what's happening in our community today, is to understand that we got here not alone. The rest of the United States is in a very similar boat, and we got here over time. Now, where can people in Southeast Kansas or Pittsburgh, Kansas go if they are not housed? This is data, again, from the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition 2022 count. We counted the number of emergency shelter beds. So we used to have an emergency shelter across the street here. That would have been counted then. We also have domestic violence shelters throughout our region. Those are counted. Rapid rehousing beds are also counted in there, as well as transitional housing beds. But if we go back to that first statistic, we had 322, I believe, people in Southeast Kansas, 112 in the city of Pittsburgh, and there's 297 available sleeping spaces in shelter for those people. At the time of the count, it's important to recognize that an unsheltered person does not equate to an empty bed. That bed is full of people too. Does that make sense? So even though there's 112 people in the city of Pittsburgh, and we can look at emergency shelter beds in the whole region is 113, there's still a disconnect because those 113 are already full. So the 112 that need them don't have a space to go into. So all of this to say, I'm asking you as our elected leaders to realize that this group of people is data informed. We know what our resources are, and we know what we're lacking. And so literally what we're lacking is places for people to get into housing. We have a current system called coordinated entry. So that's some of the jargon I am going to use because it's a very important strategy. It's an evidence-based practice that prioritizes clients based on their vulnerability. Another way to say that is instead of their vulnerability, it's if they stay on the street, they're most likely to die first. So we look at things like what their healthcare conditions are, if somebody's pregnant or not, if they've experienced violent trauma or not, and so forth. It's a very intrusive questionnaire, but it's step one to getting into services. And we do that on purpose. One, so that we know who the people that we're working with are and what they're facing, and we can prepare ourselves for it. But also so that we know what resources are best for the person that we're trying to help. I also want to pause here a minute and talk about evidence-based. So when I say evidence-based practice, there's a definition for that. That means that there has been a time period of scientific research done on a model of engagement of whatever it may be. And so rather than using my feelings and saying, I think it would be a good idea if we did this to Casey, I could look at a catalog of evidence-based practices and say, time has shown if we engage Casey A, B, C, his outcomes will look like D. I'm just going to keep using this as my example person. So in our coordinated entry system in Southeast Kansas, we're Region 8. This is part of a larger statewide coalition, which is part of a national coalition. So if we want federal money or state money to assist us in these endeavors, we have to participate in this system. They do that because it's evidence-based, right? So you can see where we are in the state. I also want to take a moment to congratulate my colleagues because in the last 5 years, our region has kind of catapulted itself in the state of Kansas to being acknowledged as one of the best COCs, there's more jargon, one of the best regional collaborative efforts on getting into coordinated entry. They're doing really well, so congratulations, guys. I'm impressed. So in our current system of coordinated entry, I'm going to back up for just a second. You see the person in the middle of that circle, we could say is a person experiencing homelessness. And every one of those green blocks, I know the text is probably too small for you all back there, but it represents education, early childhood education, transportation, healthcare, employment, law enforcement, mental health, substance use. All of those social service agencies around that person can enroll that person in coordinated entry. So there's no wrong door to getting homeless services. That is intentional, right? Because the last thing that we want to do when we're schlepping a backpack around town and all of our belongings and trying to get out of the rain and trying to do all the things to keep ourselves fed and safe is go from business to business to business, nonprofit to nonprofit. So this coordinated entry system does a couple of things. One, it makes it simplifies access for the person who is literally experiencing homelessness. It reduces duplication of services because once they're enrolled in coordinated entry, we're all looking at the same database. And so we all know who's getting what service where and getting what support where. Third, it puts this person literally at the center of the conversation every week, I believe. Is it every week that we have coordinated entry meetings where all the service providers literally sit around the table to say what's best for this person, ranked based on their vulnerability, right, and our history with them, what's the best intervention for this person. So it's a very valuable tool to use, and I really want to emphasize how well it's being employed in Southeast Kansas. We do have some future opportunities. We're not perfect. We're pretty darn good down here. These guys are doing a great job, but we do have some opportunities. We can always increase collaboration and make our table bigger. There's more room for hospitals to participate, additional law enforcement, re-entry coordination. That means when somebody's re-entering mainstream, whether they're bonding out or being released from incarceration or hospitalization, having a strategy and a plan for that reentry is really paramount to their success. Specialty courts are something that we're trying to talk about. You may have heard of a drug court. They also have behavioral health courts. Homeless courts exist as well, right? The crime of loitering is a crime. And when you're homeless and you have nowhere to go, you're kind of always loitering. So these are things we can continue to explore. We have very few sober living environments as well. So I've talked to folks who have gone through detox treatment programs through our mental health center. And when they get out, they go right back into the environment that they left, around the same people and the same behaviors. And it's very easy then to kind of fall back into that. So sober living homes are a wonderful place for peer support and peer empowerment and accountability from somebody who's already been there and knows what they're facing. And then I think the biggest piece on our future opportunities is establishing a more intentional and robust outreach and response system. So presently we have Crawford Mental Health Center, so it is a community mental health center of Crawford County, as a crisis response partner. And they're one entity, and they are responding through the lens of mental health only. We also have law enforcement, and they are one entity responding through the lens of law, right? We also have some peer support at Wesley House that can help respond to people who are experiencing homelessness, and they've done it as well. So we have opportunity to coordinate that a little bit better, get some additional training and kind of elevate the practices, bring some evidence-based practices into our response on a greater level. So it's getting better, and I think we can continue to get better. Now, once a person goes through coordinated entry, they come from whatever entity they want, they get prioritized, they're in this list, we're talking about them at the table every week. The very next step is to get them into housing, and the way that we have to do that in our region is through vouchers. And what a voucher is, it is a document that's demonstrating the person qualifies based on their income, household size, and a host of other things to have their rent paid for them. So within Southeast Kansas, we probably have more than 1,000, 1,200 vouchers out. I think in the city of Pittsburgh, we're probably close to 1,000 vouchers out. So that's 1,000 households that are getting their rent subsidized primarily through these three entities here, Catholic Charities and the city of Pittsburgh and CCAP. And that is payment that goes on continuously. So a family can stabilize or an individual can stabilize, and then the ideal is that they then improve whatever conditions led to their homelessness, stabilize that, and then become independent. Predominantly, our voucher system is what we call tenant-based. That means that piece of paper that says they qualify is attached to a person. And so if I have a voucher, I can go to any private landlord and ask if I can rent their house and try to enter into that lease. If that lease is broken, I can take my voucher and I can go to a different location. That gets tricky because I don't know how long it's been since you've all looked for a rental. It's a lot of work to find a rental. It takes quite a bit out of a person. So what we don't want to do is have people moving every 3-6 months. So typically the vouchers require a 12-month lease, and we try to hold them to it. But at the end of that lease, it's a market rate unit, and a landlord can elect to not reinstate it. So predominantly tenant-based vouchers means that we don't have what we call place-based vouchers. So I'm going to digress for just a minute and explain the difference in the subsidies. A tenant-based voucher is a payment directly to a landlord to allow a person to live in a house. A place-based voucher is payment to a landlord to allow a person to live in that house. So that's through HUD. Or it can be a subsidy to the build of a unit. So one subsidy comes in one time, making the cost of the unit lower, meaning the rent can be lower. And that is the more fiscally sustainable approach to vouchers, because you don't have to have new money coming in every month. You have one chunk coming in at the beginning of that build, subsidize the build of the structure, and then the rents can be maintained at an affordable level. So some gaps in our rental subsidy system. We don't have an overnight shelter. So until a person gets through coordinated entry and elevated to the top of that list and has themselves a voucher, they're on the street. They're not safe. They have no place for their belongings. They have no place for all kinds of things. And I think that is the visuals that we are seeing as a community that's making us all very uncomfortable. Nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants it to exist. But without a safe place to be overnight, locking a door and sleeping, you're going to be walking around to stay safe, right? You stay awake all night long so that you can watch your back, and then you sleep during the middle of the day so that you can catch up on your rest, so that you can walk around all night long again to stay safe. So often when you see people who are experiencing homelessness lounging in the middle of the day, it's less of being lazy and more of that's when we have to sleep because it's light and people can see us. And when we see them in the middle of a park, it's because we can see them. When I recently drove across country and I had to camp in my van, did I find a dark corner of a parking lot to camp in? No, I was right in the middle of Walmart under the brightest light because I wanted to be highly visible, right? And so that's what our community members who are experiencing homelessness are often faced with without an overnight shelter. A funny thing about our voucher systems, and this is a federal rule, not something that Jamie or Kim and Megan can address or Casey can address. When a person is issued a voucher and they get that paper to go find a house, it has to go through U.S. mail, which is so ironic, right? If you're homeless, how do you get your mail? So thankfully, Wesley House has stepped up and a lot of the mail goes to Wesley House, but then we have the secondary challenge of having to go find that person or wait until they show up. And there's a timeline, there's an expiration date. So without a really coordinated outreach effort, we have some folks fall through the cracks there as well. Then when you get the voucher, our predominant population experiencing homelessness is a single individual. And so then when we get a voucher that supports a single individual, so right here, that's a $700 rent payment standard. So I have $700 a month in rent in my hand when I'm holding that voucher, and I need a 1-bedroom. There's very, very few of them here in Southeast Kansas and in Pittsburgh specifically. And I think we could tie some of that to the lack of that housing production in the past that we were talking about. We can also tie some of it to the university students. It's much easier to have a university, well, I don't know, depends on what kind of land you are. But a lot of them elect to have university students rather than somebody on a voucher service. And then when we do find 1-bedroom homes, these vouchers have standards on terms of the quality of the housing. And they're pretty high. I think the house I'm currently living in wouldn't pass the housing quality standards that HUD expects for our voucher participants. So you've lived in Pittsburgh long enough to know that there are some homes that have become dilapidated. And so that further reduces the number of available housing units for people to use with their vouchers. There's very few place-based subsidies. I mentioned that before. And then post-housing support. There's limited, if any, post-housing support. What that means, I like to use myself as an example there. When I moved out of my parents' house, I had my dad who was checking on me on occasion, right? Did you mow your lawn? Do you need anything? Did you get your bills paid? Don't forget this. It was really, really important when I was young at age 18 and thought I knew everything in the world to have an adult beside me, reminding me that there are bits and pieces I might be forgetting. And so imagine if you have a severe persistent mental illness, or if you're running from domestic violence, you're a survivor of domestic violence. There's a lot more things that you need, a lot more support than just, hey, did you mow your yard? And we have very limited post-housing support here. So first I'm going to describe the picture, and then we'll talk about some evidence-based practices for our future visits. So this picture is an illustration of what we mean by housing first. Housing First is a philosophy that says we have to take care of basic needs before we can take care of higher order needs, right? So if you remember Sociology 101, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a triangle, and the very bottom layer of that triangle is safety and security. That's where housing lies. And then you move up to social integration, all the way up to self-awareness, right? But before you can do anything else, you have to be safely housed. So if we're talking with folks who have suffered severe trauma or are experiencing a mental illness or an addiction to a substance, and expecting them to take care of that first before they get into housing, we're going to dramatically limit the number of people that get into housing, which means there are going to be more people on the streets because we don't have an overnight shelter. So the Housing First model, which is aligned with national goals, and it is an evidence-based practice as well, says the first thing we do is learn everything we can about this person, get them into a house, and then start addressing all the needs that we learned about as we were getting to know them, and give them the resources that they need. And then that post-housing support comes into play. And that's where you keep coming back and make sure we mowed the lawn and took our medication and paid the rent. Now, I think, Darren and I were talking earlier this week, and I think that this illustration might be a little bit misleading because it doesn't show after you get into the housing also doing sobriety and employment and program participation, right? And that is what happens after you get into housing. Then we're going to do these things with you. But you don't have to do them first. You don't have to jump over all those hurdles to get a safe place to lay your head and lock your stuff. So our future vision around evidence-based practices includes continuing to build out more coordinated entry, making our table bigger, bringing in more partners, adopting Housing First as a policy, and I think some programs have it, individual programs have Housing First as a policy, but collectively, as a community, we have not adopted that. Exploring more judicial diversion programs. So there's a couple reasons for that. Again, you can, if it's against the law to loiter, you're trespassing. If you have nowhere to go, you're trespassing. So there, we will see crimes or people convicted of crimes that are what I like to call crimes of homelessness. Like you really don't have, you're just there. There's a lot of other shenanigans too, I'll give you that. But sometimes it's pretty simple. A judicial diversion program is a way to, at the intersection of law enforcement and the judicial process, we can divert people to community support. So supportive services, programming, etc. In order to engage in mental health care, the patient has to choose to do it. So if I'm suffering from paranoid schizophrenia, I have to make a very logical decision in my psychosis to enroll in a mental health program. It typically doesn't happen very easily, right? Because I'm in psychosis. I'm schizophrenic, and I'm not making logical choices anyway. A judicial diversion program puts the opportunity in front of a person in a way where they see negative repercussions if they don't do that. It's not forcing somebody to engage in mental health care, but it's giving them an opportunity other than incarceration. And even in psychosis, I'll take that because I know I don't want to be in the jail. So judicial diversion program can, in theory, help us get more people into the treatment and the help that they need to keep them in housing longer. Overnight shelter is, I keep bringing it up. If nobody has a place to go, we're going to keep sleeping on the streets because that's the only place to be. We need to build more right-size housing. What I mean by that is using our data, our needs assessment. The state has a needs assessment. I think the city of Pittsburgh's is 1 year old. It's, yeah, so it's really fresh. So this needs assessment literally counts how many houses we have, how many bedrooms are in the houses, what the price ranges of those houses are for sale, for rent. Then it looks at our total population. It looks at incomes of those populations and ages of those populations, and it literally makes recommendations. So in the Southeast Kansas region, 800 houses a year is what we're supposed to be aiming at to build in order to meet the needs. So they are not all going to be 3 bedrooms, 2 bath ranches with a 1-car garage. Some of them really need to be studios where somebody who doesn't have a lot of things and other people in their family can stay. So right side housing, place-based rental subsidies, I already talked about that. Post-housing supportive services, we talked about that. And post-housing community engagement. What I mean by that is that people who have experienced homelessness understand that experience so much better than those of us who haven't. And so engaging them back into the community designs, giving them an opportunity to demonstrate their value to the community, makes all of this activity better and better. So that's what I mean by post-housing community engagement. So what do we want to do? I think the next 2 slides, this one's about immediate steps and the next one's about a longer term plan. So immediate steps, right now we have some pilot programs. CHC, SEK, and Wesley House would also like to operate an overnight shelter again. I don't think it's going to be at Wesley House. I know we would like to make sure people have a safe place to be out of the elements for the winter. And we have some funds raised. We just need to identify a location. We do have some folks working with our city prosecutor, I believe, to refer people during their process to a community health worker at CHC, so that community health worker can help engage them in services and behaviors and activities that'll perhaps get them out of the law enforcement trouble, but mostly get them into housing. And then we have our friends at the Community Mental Health Center of Crawford County that have same-day access, and they have housing access for specific subset of people experiencing homelessness or having mental illness. I said that wrong. A specific subset for people who are living with a severe persistent mental illness. They don't have to be homeless, but they have to have a mental illness. So that's currently underway. We're going to continue operating those. Working on a housing plan. So big words, housing plan there. That's an official thing that a lot of our funders look at. If communities have housing plans, they are more likely to receive state and federal assistance and philanthropic assistance to address the need. So establishing a regional housing plan, which will be heavily Pittsburgh because this is the biggest community in our region, to get people from homeless to housed. So we're going to use evidence-based practices. We want it to be multidisciplinary so that we have all of our partners at the table. And our goal is to make homelessness rare and brief. So that phrase, making homelessness rare and brief, is a relatively new national initiative. State, federal, and philanthropic resources are associated with that. We recognize as professionals in this field that there's likely always going to be homelessness. We're like solving it is, there always has been. So if we solve it, I mean, we won. That's awesome. But the idea is that if people fall into homelessness, make it very brief, get them back into housing. After this plan's drafted, these service providers and more are going to retreat and work with a skilled facilitator from our friends at Greenbush to walk through the plan, make sure that we're all on board with it, that we have all of our activities accurately represented, those that we are aspiring to do represented, really indicate which one of the social service agencies is taking the lead and responsible for reporting out on their data and their outcomes. And then we'll move into adopting it. And that is where each organization would adopt that plan individually. We would bring it before our elected bodies like yourself to demonstrate it and say, we are the people doing this practice. We have a strategy in place and we want you to endorse it and give us a thumbs up on it. And then we can move into identifying additional funding streams to help support that, engaging the community broadly with education, and presenting it out to our partners broadly. then it's just a matter of putting that plan into place, right? Doing the things we say we're going to do. And that will include continuous review and evaluation. And what I mean by that is everything we're doing right now is data informed. So we're collecting a lot of data, looking at that data to say, is it working? If this is working, let's keep going with it. If this part's not, let's bring it back to the planning table to figure out why it's not working and move it forward that way. So we will be committed to that continuous process, review and evaluation. As well as reporting out to the community. One of the things I've heard, probably from some of the folks in this room, judging by how packed it is I shouldn't say I've heard it from them. I am assuming that we collectively are not doing a good enough job telling our story of the work that we are doing and the successes that we're having. So one of the commitments in this plan is to have regular reporting back out to our community and an online dashboard. And I want to point out, hats off to Wesley House, which has already started this online dashboard. So if you go to wesleyhouseumc.org, is that right? You can kind of see a running tally throughout the year of how many people we're serving, how many are getting into houses, and how many are getting into food. So this housing plan has many parts to it. That's this next step. Coordinated entry is one part, and that's already happening. Outreach and response is a second part, and it's starting to get, I would say, underway formally. Then we need that overnight shelter if we want to get people a place to sleep off the streets, a place to put their stuff off the streets, place to take care of their personal hygiene off the streets. The overnight shelters is involved, and then establishing permanent supportive housing. Remember, that's the housing where Dad would come help me make sure I mowed my lawn and didn't get in trouble with my landlord. We need some permanent supportive housing in our community. There are folks experiencing homelessness who are struggling and may continue to struggle even after they're housed. And by offering them the support in their housing, we can stop that cycle and stop that loop from happening again, where people fall into homelessness and then back into housing. About 20 to 30 housing units constructed could likely cause a significant change in what we see on the streets. Those housing units, if they are subsidized during their construction, they don't have to have the inflow of subsidies every single month. We can construct them at a cost. So the debt is low enough that there doesn't need to be voucher subsidies coming at them. On-site supportive services are very important because relationships are important when you're on the street. That's how, well, they're important even when you're not on the street, right? Our social relationships are what get us jobs sometimes. They're what help us find new cars sometimes. And so if I'm homeless and I've been homeless for a long time and I find myself in a house now, those social relationships that I've developed over the years are still important. And I maintain a relationship with people. Sometimes they'll come in. And that can be the beginning of some negative cycles. So having on-site supportive services helps us take a step to intervene when maybe the friends are moving in that shouldn't be moving in yet. And then right-size housing goals. Again, basing on our housing needs assessment, make sure we're constructing the right things, make sure we're balancing how many rentals versus how many ownership opportunities we're constructing. We're looking at a land trust model for home ownership. That's where BHI, Building Health Inc., can serve as the owner of the land, lease the land above it to build a house on. And that's where there's home ownership opportunities, entry-level home ownership opportunities. That does a couple things. It lets people step into home ownership with support next to them. And it keeps the original subsidy that was used to build that house recycling every time the house changes hands. Because in the land trust model, the equity that's gained in the house goes to the seller of the house. The equity that's gained in the land stays with the land. And since a nonprofit organization working on social determinants of health isn't trying to get rich, based on that equity, we can keep the next sale price very low. We're also working with Pittsburgh Land Bank pretty regularly to identify empty lots and build houses on them quickly. And then a big stretch is landlord-tenant education. There's been, my observation is there has been many years in the city of Pittsburgh of poor behavior by tenants, poor behavior by landlords that is outside of fair housing laws, typically outside of normal lease agreements, and has perpetuated kind of a negative attitude towards lower income renters. So landlord-tenant education across the board is going to be helpful for everybody. And I put my contact info up there, primarily for all the guests that are here. If there's any questions about anything I said today, or if we want to dive deeper, you can reach me at bgray, Gray, at chcsek.org. And my cell phone number, 719-239-1398, is also up there. Feel free to call. It might go to voicemail, but I will call you back. And I ask our elected body here, if you have any questions for my colleagues or myself, we are incredibly happy to answer.
Right now, I got a couple. You said the homelessness in Pittsburgh is 100 and some? I'm not sure.
113 at our last count.
And how do you come up with that number?
That's a great question. There is a single night in January, I believe it's the last Thursday of every January, where across the nation, homeless service providers attempt to literally count everybody who's homeless. So there's a lot of guidance from HUD at the federal level on how to do that. We can count folks coming into Wesley House to get food and ask them if they're homeless. That's one way. Or at any of our social service agencies. At the hospitals, in the jails, we can ask those questions. And then there's also outreach opportunities. Now, I think my colleagues could answer better. In 2022, was there outreach on the street?
There was very limited outreach.
Very limited. So typically in the outreach, you go to where you know there's already camps and talk to folks. Again, without a robust, evidence-based outreach effort in our community, we're a little hesitant to walk out in the middle of the night on a January.
Yeah.
And that's my question, because then you said there's like 300 in the county,
On that night,
Let me go back to that
on
slide.
that night that we.
but we don't know how many, because,
The 322 is in all of southeast Kansas, so that's those counties. The 112 is in the city of Pittsburgh.
How many actual housing units do we have for the people that are, for the 112 right now?
Very few. That's
No.
that's the point, because most of them want to be one bedroom. Some of them need to have that permanent support attached to them. That doesn't exist at all.
So I think one of the questions to answer, and maybe from Megan, is how many people have vouchers and have not found a house, have not found housing?
Good question.
Well, so for an example, I updated the whole month of May. That was 150 applicants. I placed 75 of them inactive. And then I'm about to issue 75 of those vouchers. So it's really hard to keep track of why somebody doesn't use a voucher. It's either, they may not need the assistance anymore. They couldn't find it. They've moved away. They found other other housing opportunities. But I typically probably drop about 30% of the vouchers that I issue. But we can't keep track of why.
Right.
Does that go back to Becky's earlier point about the U.S. mail thing? Do those have to be, or is that separate?
So the appointment letters have to be mailed by, yes, that's a federal regulation. We can't get around that. But as far as once they have that voucher, then they're free to look for housing within the city limit, in our jurisdiction, the city limits of Pittsburgh.
and then you
Is
talked
this-
about
Is there such a thing as a housing bank where you know how many houses are available out there?
So we have a landlord list, as federal regulation as well. We are not allowed to find for the Section 8 rental assistance program, we are not allowed to find housing for individuals. We give them a landlord list, because it's called a housing choice voucher, so they choose where they want to live. So we can't direct somebody to a certain landlord or anything along those lines. We have to give them a landlord list.
Is the landlord's list can anybody use the landlord's list?
Yes.
Or is it specific for homelessness?
No, anybody can use that landlord list.
Okay.
Those landlords have asked us to give out their information because they accept our rental assistance.
Okay.
Then Becky, you talked about the need for 20 to 30 units, housing units. Are those houses, or could they be like I'll just throw this out there, like homeless veterans? Could it be like a facility for what you're talking, it's not just houses you're talking?
Absolutely. So, yeah, when I say housing units, they could be apartments as well as, or mobile homes or houses. The most cost-effective approach to constructing 30 at once is a multifamily unit.
Right.
To do that, we have to find the right place in our community that's zoned appropriately for it, or have to go through the entitlement process of a plan development if it's not. So.
Do you get any help from the Veterans Association for veterans who are homeless?
Do you want to take that, Casey?
So Catholic Charity Southeast Kansas Services operates, we have a veteran program through the VA called the Supportive Services for Veterans Families, and we actually provide rapid rehousing, homeless prevention, and shallow subsidy services through 25 counties from Wichita to here. So our veterans in this entire area are prioritized and go directly to that VA-funded program and to our friends in Kansas City and Robert J. Dole.
Thank you.
So they almost jump, if they're a veteran, they can jump to the top of that coordinated entry list.
There is a
and
prioritization
go
for them.
directly here.
Yes.
Related to vulnerability.
Good question.
Becky, so it's data driven, I appreciate all the stats. I'm a little stuck on 6% increase in homelessness nationwide since 2017. You don't have to watch the news for 4 minutes to think that there's probably, it just seems like in America today, there's way more than 6% more homeless than there was in 2017. So what has changed? Is there obviously, we're tearing down structures that are inhabitable, so those wouldn't have been, that's not affecting that number, but how do you, I don't see how you can possibly say, anybody can say there's only 6% increase in homelessness with it seems like a third of America is living under a bridge somewhere.
Yeah.
What piece, and the only reason I care is to extrapolate down to Pittsburgh. I'm like, obviously something's changed here since 2017 too.
Sure.
So how do you how is it, I figured it would be 56%.
So I'm pulling this answer out of my ear. This is not data informed.
I'm not trying to put you on
I
the
didn't
spot. I
write
just
that,
don't understand.
but I have a lot of thoughts about it. And I think part of it, if you remember back when we were in math in high school and we were learning about the J curve and exponential growth. Do you guys remember this?
No, don't throw math at us.
And as our population was growing, right, over time, when there was a small population, our growth was relatively steady and growing higher. So I'm looking at a chart here. And as more and more people come, the growth becomes greater and greater, quicker and quicker. So we are up here on the J curve of population growth, generally speaking. So there's more and more people every day. So that's one reason we're seeing it more visibly. Between 2017 and 2022 was the pandemic, and that changed the whole world. A lot of people stepped out of the job market. A lot of services were cut due to funding, and the support was cut due to funding. And I think that increased the number of homelessness. What really catches me is that there's more people literally unsheltered than ever before in the collection of this data. That means there's more people literally living under the bridges than ever before.
And rents are going up.
And rents are going up.
Are there statistics to show that that homelessness, has gone up as drug use has gone up?
Oh gosh, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know if any of my colleagues do. I do know that there's evidence that shows when mental health hospitals were deinstitutionalized and shut down, and those group living environments where people had direct mental health care were disbanded, homelessness was exacerbated.
So, not to bring it all home, but it's 5:35. People are standing that we should have found chairs for, but what you're saying basically is we don't have enough places for them. To cut it down to, and obviously there's barriers to people getting in. Some people can't use a voucher because of they used to manufacture meth, whatever it is, there's always something. But we don't, our housing study, you referred to the housing study, our housing study said we need all houses.
Correct.
Across, if you remember. It didn't say
Correct.
we need 3 and 2, $250,000. It said we need housing across the board. But we're at when we were doing the housing study, we had the BESS and we had several other LIGHTC, which is low-income housing tax credit. That's an acronym for developers interested in building those. And we had some going on. The BESS had just happened, and so there was a need. But we don't manufacture developers. We solicit. I mean, if somebody wants to make another chicken place, we're not going to say we're full of chickens. There's no more chicken coming. So that's a challenge for us because we can't build all the housing we currently need. I think to Chuck's point, it's a pretty good one. What we probably could do is look at our zoning, and we have a lot of R1, which is strictly which excludes multifamily. And we may need to put out a better message of maybe there are some apartments, maybe there's some other options in that. But I think those are the things the city do. But I wanted people to walk out here thinking, well, the city's just sat on this for 7 years and hasn't marketed. We don't create developers. They call and we say, how can we help you? And it seems like that hasn't been it's definitely a gap, but I would argue there's a gap across every housing level we have right now in Pittsburgh. We just don't have that many builders. So I do, but it does sound like you're saying housing. There's obviously, if you have people on the street, if they're in a house, they're not gonna be on the street.
Right.
Is it that simple sometimes?
That's correct, yeah, and I think you're correct, Darren. The city can make policy changes that can make it easier for us to build multifamily or denser housing. I think that the developers are the ones that are building housing, and market rate developers are gonna build the housing that puts money in their pocket. So low income and permanent supportive housing typically isn't created by market rate developers. And that's where nonprofits come in, right? That's where our advocacy and our linkages and perhaps even doing it ourselves come in. So that's why I mentioned that housing development in our plan. It's not to say the city needs to do this, but to say it's in this collective vision and one of us is going to take it on.
We're approaching the time to, well, we should have started, but we agreed that we'd go to 5:40, and it's 5:38 now. So if there's anything you need to wind this up, to round it up, you've got 2 minutes.
Awesome. I just want to say thank you very much for hosting this work session. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you, and I also appreciate the opportunity to speak to all these people who are highly interested in this topic and hear the same language spoken and the same data presented. So
I would like to
you.
thank all the folks who came tonight. They're obviously interested in doing something. So, what else can we do but get rolling? We gotta get rolling. We can do this. We've done other things in this community that have done things for people. So let's get rolling on this and do what we can.
It takes everybody to get on board.
Thank you.
Can we start the meeting at 5:50 and give everybody time to get out of here without trampling one another? And they're invited to stay, of course, but.
We'll start the commission meeting with the flag salute, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to ask His Lordship Mark Chambers, the Reverend Mark Chambers, to come forward and give us the invocation, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. May we pray? Father, we give you thanks for this beautiful day and for the cool weather and for the rain that we received to be fresh. And we thank you, Father, that we can come together this evening to look at the future of our city and to give thanks for what we have and for what we need to be doing as we look forward and work together. May all decisions tonight be made in peace and harmony. May they be made with the Spirit guidance. And bless our commissioners, bless our city staff, bless all of our city workers. We give you thanks for their dedication for what they do. Bless the citizens of Pittsburgh and bless us all to live in peace and harmony to make this a great city for all to live, to enjoy. We ask this in your holy, precious name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone who wants to do any specific public input? Sir?
Hello, I'm Brian Hanson, owner-operator of McCarthy's Pub. Been in business here for close to 19 years now. Just in the past, as we were, listening earlier, I'd like to tell you as a business owner's perspective of what I've seen with the homeless issues. In the last 2 years especially, I've dealt with it quite often. I've had a situation where a homeless person came in with backpacks and stuff and was asked to leave. They wouldn't immediately leave. Next thing they knew, they pulled out about a 3 to 4 foot knife on my bartender, threatened to kill him, basically. Had to call the cops. That's a whole ordeal. I also had regular customers in there that had to watch the whole thing. It's not a good look for a business. I found them in my dumpster. I found them there's a collection box where like my used grease goes from the kitchen. There's a bucket always on top of it. I found that bucket in the middle of my parking lot with human feces in it before. I speak to other business owners also, and we all talk about the same types of things. So whatever she's talking about and trying to bring more home situations for these people is just going to continue to come and come and come. We've seen a spike. There's no doubt about it. We've seen a spike in the last 2 years for whatever that means, if it's the free dinners and the lunches they get, or whatever other handouts they might receive, but they are coming more and more and more for all those situations. So if you guys get on board with providing more for them, where there's going to be more that keep showing up. You're welcome to, I can answer any questions, but I have at least 6 to 8 to 10 different situations with the homeless people. When they come, they're very combative. They won't leave. Most of the time they're trying to use my bathroom for whatever reason. They want free water. They want, everything handed to them. And then if you tell them no, that's when they get upset and combative. And then, Pittsburgh police has to be involved, and I'm sure they'd rather be doing anything else in the world being at my place dealing with a homeless person. I feel like they got other responsibilities. But you guys have any questions for me? No?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary Gilpin? I'm sorry?
I'm the regent.
You're the regent? Okay, very good. This is the Office of the Mayor, City of Pittsburgh, Kansas, a proclamation. Whereas September 17, 2023 marks the 236th anniversary of the drafting of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention, and whereas it is fitting and proper to accord official recognition to this magnificent document and its memorable anniversary, and to the patriotic celebrations which will commemorate the occasion, and Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America designating September 17th through the 23rd as Constitution Week. Now, therefore, I, Ron Sigley, Mayor of the City of Pittsburgh, Kansas, do hereby proclaim the week of September 17th through the 23rd, 2023 as Constitution Week in Pittsburgh. And ask our citizens to reaffirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 by vigilantly protecting the freedoms guaranteed to us through this guardian of our liberties, remembering that lost rights may never be regained. Dated this 12th day of September 2023. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the consent agenda.
Oh,
I think there's some more public
more
input.
public input.
I thought we got done with this. Okay, Kevin?
Thank you. My name's Kevin O'Connell. I live here in the city. Been
Your
a long
address?
time resident here.
Your address, please.
1602 North Grant.
Okay.
On the other side of the coin, we've had some ongoing discussions here. I'd like to discuss some ongoing issues with ordinance enforcement and judicial and prosecutorial conditions here. We have observed that the ordinance against camping that was just passed needs to be rewritten again due to loopholes that have come up that have led to ineffective enforcement out there. We also have found that property owners are starting to allow camping on their property against the ordinance, which requires written permission. So we think the property owner should be cited for allowing camping on their property without the written permission per the current ordinance. We also realize that law enforcement has become overwhelmed with responding to calls on this ordinance and on other issues with homeless and crime. Businesses, just like McCarthy's Pub was talking about, Goodwill and Salvation have endured homeless entering their businesses and walking out with large amounts of merchandise without paying for it. We need to ensure law enforcement has the tools and standardized response instructions to deal with ordinance enforcement and crime response. We're having problems with theft, both petty and up to the felony level, that are ongoing and increasing as we don't have enough personnel out there on the street to pursue these crimes that are happening. We think that the citizens need to be provided with case numbers and reports. I think there's a lot of folks out there who have contact with the police aren't getting a case number. If there's not a case started by the police, if there wasn't contact that led to a report, I think the citizens need to understand that that's what's going on there. If they're given a case number, I realize that there's a couple of days there before we're going to get a report from the police. And I think that needs to be communicated to the citizens that the police have contact with out on the street that are dealing with these conditions. And here recently, we observed a day of the municipal court proceedings, and we found that it's a revolving door of repeat homeless offenders that appear before the judge for criminal trespass and have no fixed residence to locate them, no employment, have paid no fines for previous offenses, and are then given 30-day suspended sentences and are free to walk out. The sentencing is consistently minimum sentences and fines. So we've got a repeat pattern of offenses where they are brought back here. Some of them that I watched were 4 to 6 offenses previously where there have been no fines paid. There is no employment. There is no fixed residential address. And so we have no way of collecting these fines, and they're just repeatedly occurring over and over and over again. Basically, I think it's time to we start incarcerating for each offense, and when they're released, we need to remove them from the community. If they're not from Pittsburgh, then we need to return them from the cities and towns that they came here from. They don't have any association here. We have the judicial and prosecutorial staff that need to prosecute these offenses with jail time or community service to pay the fines that the offenders can't pay them. I think the city and county sheriff could discuss how to provide supervision to manage any community service. One of the things that came up during the court session was there's not any community service programs out there. And that may be one way to help clean up the city, maybe some way to start getting people integrated into the city to help them. And I just think that we need to stop this revolving door process where they're just cycling through the system over and over again all the time. And Pittsburgh citizens, I believe, are paying taxes to Crawford County for jail services that we're not receiving. The county law enforcement, as I understand it, are refusing to enforce sentences due to overcrowding at the jail. And I would suggest that if a tent city with appropriate fencing and staffing needs to be constructed to enforce these sentences, I'd like to see if we can come up with some plans to do something like that, to expand the jail facilities that are over there. On Wesley House, the neighborhood around Wesley House, they've cleaned up a lot of the hang-arounds and things like that that are out there, but the whole neighborhood directly around Wesley House is now becoming a trash zone around there from all the meals and stuff that are being served up there. And there needs to be some changes about trash collection and how they're managing the refuse left after the meal periods up there. Since Wesley House has removed most of the violators from their property, the homeless have taken over our public pavilions and parks. And these areas have become drug dens, sleeping areas, and are unsafe for the citizens that pay for them to use. The homeless occupy the parks all day, kind of what the lady was saying previously, trying to get some sleep during the day where they're unsafe at nighttime. After 11 p.m., when the police arrive out there, as soon as the police leave, they return right back to the same place. And so the police are getting multiple calls for the same thing of these people occupying the parks and pavilions after allowable hours. Also, the children of our city can't use these parks without danger of needles, syringes, and aggressive behavior panhandling out there. The number of homeless is increasing weekly. We're seeing a lot more rapid increase in the numbers there. We're getting reports of people that we've never seen before. One of the things that's come up, and I don't know this to be 100% fact, but I understand that the parole offices in the state of Kansas, most of them are overwhelmed, and so that parolees are being released to Pittsburgh because we have a lower number of parolees to manage here. And just dumping parolees on us is just going to contribute to the continuation of the issues that we have.
You're at about 7 minutes now.
Okay, I have 30 seconds more. Thank you. Repeated reports of homeless being brought to Pittsburgh by other municipalities continue. Mayor, I know this was a sore subject the last meeting we had a little bit, but we keep getting these reports. We've got to have some concrete evidence if that's what's going on. If somebody's busing these people in here or bringing them here in groups, we need to figure out how that's happening. Our suggestion.
Have you seen any buses? I mean,
personally, no, sir.
No. Who has seen them?
Nobody. Nobody has seen
Who
that.
has seen? You know,
I can't quote a name
you're doing generalities, and it's knocking the heck out of my brain because you know we. Who is we? Who's seen them busing people in?
Well, it's anecdotal at this point.
Well, it's not,
Mayor.
You're addressing the citizens of the city of Pittsburgh, and you're making them think that we're not doing anything And all these people are coming in from everywhere. Where and who has seen them?
Well, the second part of what I wanted to say here is a suggestion. If we want to prove that, can we put up cameras on the south end of town somewhere?
Well, hell, go ahead and do it.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, I'll let you do it.
I'll talk to city management.
No,
We're
no,
not
no.
gonna put cameras.
We're not gonna put, the city's not gonna pay to put cameras up.
You guys wanna stand there with the camera, because apparently you're out and about looking at other things, you go ahead.
And let me correct one thing you said back there, and it's not to be, the city pays a fee per day for everybody that's in the Crawford County Jail. We pay a fee. It's not just, they just go over there and they get, you know, we have to pay a fee for everyone. If we got 10 over there, it's costing us $400 to $500 a day. So, that's another thing. All right, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine, Doc. I appreciate the time to present this. We're trying to come up with creative suggestions to help the problem.
I understand that. I do. But, you know, there's a lot of innuendo going on around the city. So many,
I
there's this
understand.
and that. Buses rolling up out at the casino and people are getting out. Yeah, there are probably little old ladies that to go in to gamble, you know, I would assume anyway. But, you know, a lot of it is just innuendo. People are saying things and I want to see some facts, some evidence.
I agree with you, sir, and we need to gather some concrete evidence for you.
Okay, great.
Thank
Super,
you.
thank you.
Thank you for your time. I'm sorry.
No,
Coach.
no, she's gonna get up and defend.
If I may, I'd like to introduce Cynthia Best.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to introduce Cynthia Best, another citizen that would like to speak.
We need to let
Yeah.
some people that haven't, been able to speak before. So Monica, you wanna come on up? Okay.
I'm Gail Deathridge,
We might make sure she-
330 East 126 Highway, and I'm here as a member of the First United Methodist Church and responding to criticism for Wesley House. When we started years ago, we started as a food pantry. We still are a food pantry. We feed one out of every 5 citizens in this county once a month. We feed 20% of the people that are in the poverty level once a month. And we don't just give them a sack, we give them a grocery cart full of food. That was our goal, that was what we wanted. And Community Health now manages Wesley House for us. They came on board and the homeless arrived, not because of them, but all of a sudden the homeless population is there. And this is not what we intended, but how it just happened. I mean, what do? You know, Matthew 25 says, "You're hungry, give me a drink. You're thirsty. I mean, you're hungry, give me food. You're thirsty, give me a drink. You're a stranger, we're going to welcome you. You're sick and in prison, we're going to visit you." And we stand on that, and we're our brother's keepers. So what are we going to do? Lock our doors and say, you know, go away. You're thirsty? Go find some water. You're hungry? Go find some food. We don't do that. So
Well,
now
there are communities that do that, and they don't have, for instance, Chanute, I'll tell you, they don't have the amenities that we have here. So,
well, you know, and I'll just go on and it'll kind of answer that maybe a little bit. It is wearing out our staff. I mean, the homeless part, it just takes hours every day of the community health and our 5 employees that the church pays for. And to say nothing of the money. I mean, Community Health and First United Methodist Church pull this wagon pretty much alone. Not entirely. We have other people that step up and give donations. But we pretty much pull the wagon alone. And we, at this point in the year, we've already spent our food budget for the year.
Which has nothing to do with homeless.
Which has nothing to do with homeless. It has to do with people, the working poor.
So you still give the grocery carts full of food?
Yeah, we do. But you know, that has just taken a back seat.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
How do you decide who gets a grocery cart full of food with the
We,
homeless?
they have
You
to.
just give the homeless a meal, or?
We give breakfast and lunch to
But the
the
grocery
homeless.
cart, they have to fill out a form or something.
But the homeless don't get the food
Right,
pantry.
yeah, I got you.
Yeah.
But you're still doing that too.
Yeah, we're doing that too, and I mean, you know, we're worn out and we're poor. You know, and we really don't get much help, but we get a whole lot of abuse. And I just have to stand up and say that we're our brother's keeper. The poor will be with us always, and to whom much is given, much is expected. And we will continue serving until we can't. Thank you.
I think, Kevin, your lady there first, please.
Sure.
Hello, my name is Cynthia Best, and I live at 107 West Forest over here. We've had a lot of issues with the homeless, with ourselves, our home, and our vehicles, and our neighbors. I gave you guys some photos of what's going on in our community, where we live area. Multiple phone calls because of the cops coming out. 2 individuals are down there, and he approached our house on a Friday, and then a Sunday, our car was broke into, and again, our pictures are right there. We're still going through cameras to find out if we can get it on camera or not, but we've put cameras up to where now our community, like our neighborhood, is seen, because we're having just too much. They was living behind our neighbor's house, who's like 88 years old. He can't even go outside. He had a leg amputated. Our other neighbors found him. He moved across the street and has been sleeping in the house behind the guy in the yard since Wednesday. And he just moved yesterday, and they moved over to the vape shop, and they've been there since yesterday, today. And then when we got up this morning, we called the cops again because they had it scattered, all their junk scattered everywhere. So we're dealing with a lot. And then our neighbors across the street, their little grandson, somebody tried breaking into his window. They've called the cops. We've had officers come and say that they can't do nothing, that they're allowed to stay there for 48 hours. And yeah, and
Police are saying no, so.
well,
Okay.
and then it's just getting out of control.
Okay, thank you. We've got to move on. Monica?
Hi, I'm Monica Murney, and I live at 1313 Mallory Court here in Pittsburgh, Kansas. An hour and a half ago, I was sitting on my couch watching and not going to come up here and say anything, but here I am. What I'd like to say to all of you today is thank you for having the conversation. Thank you for having the uncomfortable conversation. The lady that has been referenced is Becky Gray. She is an expert in looking at multiple strategies to solve complex problems around housing. I hope that the information that was shared this evening that is factual, the evidence-based strategies that were listed as possible solutions, and the collaborations that were in place. What a lot of people didn't see on the screen that I saw on my couch were multiple community organizations working together on a complex and complicated problem that not only needs to be addressed humanely, but legally. Legally. I currently serve as a member of the board of directors for the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition that was referenced this evening. I represent all of Southeast Kansas. But the people doing the work were sitting in this room tonight. And I hope the commission will continue to engage them and to be one of many players in this complex situation. In another volunteer gig, I serve as the president of the board of directors for Kansas Action for Children. I'd like us to remember that while we make vast generalizations about other humans, that we are talking about kids in this situation as well. When we put people down and when we make generalizations, I think we probably need to stop and say what kids are connected to these folks as well. And finally, in another volunteer gig, I serve on the Kansas Fights Addiction Board, which is the legislatively approved board to distribute the opioid class settlement dollars in Kansas. Guess what comes up? Homelessness and housing. So when Becky discussed multiple tiers of working with folks with addiction, severely persistently mentally ill folks, and other folks along the line here, I hope that the commission will take all the information that was provided today and use it as a catalyst for everybody joining forces and trying to make sure that we make the best of our version of a nationwide problem. So thanks for hosting the event tonight. Thanks for listening to folks that are out there in the field every day. And if I can in any way be part of the solution, I offer my time to do that. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, we're gonna move on to the commission meeting
Well,
now.
I'd like to say one thing, Doc. I mean, it was a great meeting we had tonight. There's a problem that we all need to work on, and it's not gonna get done by one group. It's the total community that's gotta work on this. But I do feel compassion for the homeless. But on the same token, the people that live in a neighborhood that's dealt with this, I hear their frustration, and all they're asking is, I'm sure they would like to see the same thing everybody else does. They want these homeless people somewhere they can be inside a house somewhere, or a building, you know. But I've been in the neighborhoods, I've talked to the people in the neighborhoods, and they've become hardened because of some situations. And I talked to Don, not all homeless people are criminals, but there's criminals in the homeless population. And that's what's happening out there. So, you know, like I said, we all gotta work on this, but we gotta listen to the people as well that deal with this on a daily basis in their neighborhood. Maybe they can give some advice, we listen to them. We all need to be on the same page, and everybody should have a voice. That's all I got to say.
Can we move on?
Oh my God.
What's that, Cheryl?
Oh, I just listening.
Okay.
Okay. You have anything to pull off the consent agenda?
We haven't even done that.
None here?
No.
Okay.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Then moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. We'll do so by a roll call vote.
Brooks?
Yes.
Height?
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Munsell?
Yes.
Sigley?
Yes, okay. We have a public hearing this evening for proposed 2024 revenue neutral rate. The City of Pittsburgh advertised for a public hearing to be held on September 12th, 2023, at the City Commission meeting commencing at 5:30 p.m. In the City Commission room located in the Law Enforcement Center, 201 North Pine, for the purpose of hearing and answering questions relating to exceeding the revenue neutral rate for the 2024 budget.
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. We would like to exceed the revenue neutral rate set by the county and levy a rate of 50.896. This is a requirement of the state of Kansas to hold a public hearing to exceed the revenue neutral rate.
Bang that down again.
What?
Open the hearing.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
We'll open the hearing. Any comment from the community?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Carol Hammerbacker. I live at 405 West Euclid. And I'm wondering, is this in regard to this?
Yes.
Okay. It looks like that my taxes would go up $100. And we already, I believe, have raised the city rate already. And so I'm just concerned. Am I wrong? Is that what
We
you're
have
saying?
not- Yeah, we did not raise the mill rate last year.
You didn't
It
raise the
actually
mill rate?
It went down.
But wasn't there an increase already?
In the
Because that's what I-
in the valuation.
In the valuation.
Your property's worth more than what it was last year, is basically what.
Okay, but I thought the city rate went up.
Not the mill rate, no.
Anyway,
I know, it's complicated, yeah.
okay, so anyway, my concern, and I realize budgets are tough, but my concern is if we keep raising taxes on our property owners, it's going to affect the people that want to come to Pittsburgh. And so I just wanted to caution you on that, because I'm concerned about it. Because I just kind of know the nuts and bolts of what I deal with, and I know other people have to face that too. So I just wanted to bring that forward to you guys, okay? Thank you.
Thanks, Carol.
Any other comments on the public hearing? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. Proposed 2024 budget, the city of Pittsburgh advertised for a public hearing, which we will open, for a public hearing to be held on September 12, 2023 at the city commission meeting commencing at 5:30 PM in the city commission room located in the Law Enforcement Center, 201 North Pine, for the purpose of hearing and answering questions relating to a proposed 2024 budget.
Well, don't we have to approve or,
That's after the hearing closes, Chuck.
after this?
We'll just do both of them.
As confusing
okay.
as it is, this is actually the second hearing.
Okay.
The
Okay,
first
I
one
got
was
you,
the
I got
revenue neutral aid hearing. I think the mayor just opened up the second hearing, which I'm not testifying in, I'm just talking. And then when he closes it, we'll determine the budget.
We have any input or comment on the proposed 2024 budget? Seeing none, we'll close. Now we'll vote on it. All in,
Yeah, go ahead.
Mayor, there's a couple things we need to vote on. The first is that resolution number 1270.
Which is to exceed the revenue neutral rate.
Which was under public
Exceed.
hearing number A.
Right.
We need to approve
Yeah.
that resolution.
okay.
So,
You need to make a motion to
Yeah,
approve.
I move that we approve, or I move that we, go above the revenue neutral rate to capture the growth from the increased valuations. It's not raising the mill rate, but I move to approve that resolution 1270.
second,
Been moved and seconded to approve the resolution 1270.
can we have a little discussion? Because I think what's important is that what you've talked about before is, you know, that monies will be used to be put back into the community for streets and working on trimming trees off of roads and signage, so.
Yeah, I mean, are we on A, or are we
We're
on?
on A, we're on the revenue.
Yeah,
neutral
the
rate.
revenue neutral rate, just to clarify what Carol said, last year, the mill rate, there's two pieces of the property tax. There's the assessed valuation that the county comes up with, and then there's the mill rate that you assign to go with that, which generates the amount of tax revenue for us to pay for services. The appraised value went up last year considerably because of inflation and a variety of other things. Last year, the mill rate actually went down 0.74, so 3/4 of 1 mil. This year, well, there she is. This year, the property tax has actually gone up, and there's some new valuation there that's coming on from the FedEx showed up, and they did not ask for any incentives, so they hit the property tax books. All of that money is now realized, but there's also about a 3.8% increase in everyone's valuation of their personal property as well. And what you were referring to is us taking that growth and reprogramming it. We have the budget that's before you that has $100,000 for tree removal on the corners. We have $100,000 for demolishing old buildings and structures as we've continued on. And we have some money for the Parks and Rec Department. We have a new code enforcement officer, which you've given us our blessings. We've included that in the budget. And we have a couple of part-time Parks and Rec workers to help with the new mini golf course, which was fortunately paid for by no public money, but a state grant and donations from the community. And I will pass it off quickly. to
Yeah.
Allison.
So like Darren said, your real estate property for personal use versus commercial use, it went up about 3.83% in the valuation, and that's from the county. We are levying a rate to stay the same as last year of 50.896. So we are not raising our mill rate. We're keeping it the same. You will see an increase in your property tax because your valuation increased on a $100,000 property. It increased about $4,000. So if you were to sell your house, you would capture that growth there, and that's why your property taxes are going up. And then the excess revenue we will use for our parks department, a new codes person, and the increase in revenue only covers about 33% of the excess expenses based on inflation. So that's what that revenue will go towards, is the increase in inflation.
And Allison, what would the taxes be on that $4,000 increase?
It was like $20. We will upload a formula to our website to show you exactly what your property tax will be. So if you know your valuation from the county, you can go type it in there. Or if you say, oh, I'm going to do some improvements to my house, if I add $10,000 of improvements and they see that and they assess my value of $10,000 higher, you can see what that will cost you at Pittsburgh's mill rate, and we will upload that to our website.
I think it's also important to point out that we're not the only entity that has the opportunity to use taxes. So when they see their taxes go up, it's school district, it's county, and it's the city. So it's just not all the city. So
Yeah, the city makes up 33% of your property tax valuation, so we aren't the whole chunk of what you're taxed on. We only make up 33% of that amount.
What's the state rate is what, we have to pay to the state is what?
The state's property tax mill rate is, I think it's 20 mills to cover the state. That's not a complete guess.
And
but
I don't have the
I
exact
don't have
number
it
of the
with me.
state in front of
But
me.
it's nearly half of what our total
Yeah,
mill.
ours would be 50-ish, the county's 50-ish, the state's 20, and then the school district and.
So here's our calculator. I can zoom in a little bit. So commercial property is at 25%, residential property is at 11.5%. So if we'll add this to the website. So last year, if your property was $100,000, right now the valuation went up about $4,000, so it's $104,000 with a valuation increase of $4,000. So your residential property tax went from $585 last year to $608 this year, which is an increase of $2341
Per year.
per year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
does that help, Carol? Hopefully.
Okay.
Have a motion in a second.
Where are we here?
Good job.
We gotta vote on these two.
I'll restate my motion to approve, resolution 1270.
Second.
It's been moved and approved.
Move to second.
Resolution 1270. All in favor by saying A? Oh, this is a roll call. I'm sorry.
Brooks?
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Height. Yes.
Yes.
McNeil?
Yes.
Mansell?
Yes.
Sigley?
Yes. Now, where do we go?
I would move approval of the 2024 budget as presented.
We have a second?
I was second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed 2024 budget for the city of Pittsburgh. All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Consider the following. Conditional use permit request. Consider the recommendation of the Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals to approve a conditional use permit request submitted by Allie Smith to allow chickens as emotional support animals at 402 Suncrest Drive under the provisions of Article 30 of the Pittsburgh zoning ordinance.
Mayor, Commissioners, at the Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals meeting, August 28th of 2023, they considered the request submitted by Allie Smith for conditional use at 402 Suncrest Drive. After reviewing all the evidence presented, the Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals voted 5-2 to recommend that the governing body approve the request based on the following criteria. So with it being a conditional use permit, they set conditions on that. Was to keep the current flock of 8 chickens, which consist of 6 hens and 2 roosters. To keep the roosters in the garage between the hours of 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. The maximum amount of chickens that shall be kept shall not exceed 6 once the limit of 6 is reached through natural attrition of existing birds, and any future birds shall be hens and not roosters. So previously, when a conditional use permit was requested to have chickens, the conditions were set that no more than 6 and no roosters. Allie has 2 roosters that are considered emotional support animals for her. So the board is recommending those conditions to be set. Once those roosters are no longer, then she cannot get any more roosters. Other questions or anything else? Any additional information
I
you
have a
need?
question.
Uh-huh.
Kim?
Yes.
What does the ordinance state as far as roosters? Yes or no?
There is no ordinance restricting roosters within the city limits. There is restriction of gamecocks or fighting birds.
Okay, any of the other people that have came before the commission before that had chickens, a rooster was always an issue because you can't stop them from crowing. So how are two roosters in a garage going to not be a deterrent as far as noise for a neighborhood?
The board suggested that Ally do everything she can to, they've done some soundproofing on the coop, keeping the roosters 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. to help with the noise, and she's communicating with her neighbors to make sure that she's doing everything she can to minimize the noise.
Okay. What were the concerns of the two that voted against?
The roosters and the noise.
The roosters. Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
I would move to approve the recommendation of planning and zoning.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the recommendation from the Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals to permit the use of the animals, chickens, as emotional support animals at 402 Suncrest Drive. All in favor by saying aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have any non-agenda reports and requests?
I said aye. Did Cheryl aye?
Did Charlie?
I didn't hear, I couldn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you approve chickens?
Based on the, I'm a no because of the roosters.
Okay. Or 4 to 1, it passes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Mr. City Manager, you have any reports?
No, I think we've covered anything from the staff today.
Okay. As far as the mayor's moment's concerned, Bruce? No, I'm not going to.
You need to announce this. Announce that.
Oh, yeah, okay. I don't have any this evening, thank you. I think enough has been said. We'll go into it.
Okay, wait a minute, then I do have one. I thought somebody was gonna say something. I want to make sure we recognize the finance team for the budget work this year. We're led by Allison, who's done a great job. She's only been with us for a while, and I think she's actually officially still interim. But she works as a director every day. This is a $75 million budget. It's a big deal. She's already made some considerable improvements to the process. Her team is working lean and mean. She actually gave up, I think, one position in next year's budget and is just going with the team that she has. But her leadership and the staff, they costed out all these new programs for tree trimming and demolition and all this stuff and made sure that we were being frugal in our estimates. And so I just want to make sure we acknowledge their effort on this because they do great work. It's not always just the people in the field, but a lot of back office stuff happens at the city that's exceptional work, and her team's proof of that. So I just want to make sure I acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry.
Okay, we're going to go into an executive session to discuss data relating to the financial affairs of the corporation pursuant to KSA 75-4312, Section 9, Paragraph 4, to discuss the Jolly Fox Brewery LLC, with the meeting to resume in the commission room in 15 minutes.
I would question that. It says here 30 minutes, and the reason why I question that is I'd hate to be in there 15, it doesn't matter. If we're in there 15 minutes and come back out, if we go in there 30 minutes, maybe we can get it all discussed in 30 minutes.
But
So
if we get it discussed in 15 minutes, then we sit there for 15 minutes saying nothing.
The paperwork states 30, so if you read the executive session as it stands on the agenda, it's 30 minutes.
Okay, 30 minutes.
Do you need to read it?
You already read it?
I read it.
Okay, I move to approve it at 30.
I second it.
Okay, it's been moved and approved at 30. All in favor?
begrudgingly.
Aye.
Aye, aye. We'll adjourn to the commission meeting.
have to sign something, Tammy?
You do.
Who? Oh, okay.
But you can do yours back in open session.
Yes, we're not coming back into open session. There were no decisions made and no votes taken. And we have one more item from Blake.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As it relates to the Jolly Fox, I just wanted to let the commission know that we are in communication with the principals of the Jolly Fox Brewery, and they have every intention of repaying their existing loan with the city of Pittsburgh. So just wanted to mention that.
Thanks, Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Cheryl, are you there?
I don't think she made
No,
it.
okay.
I move to adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Second, it's been moved and seconded to adjourn the meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna call back.
That's all right.
Oh,